Hi there. I don't have video. It's Pat. I need to be authorized. It says it won't let me on video. Says the host needs to let me on.
Okay, there. Okay. Uh-oh, that didn't work. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, but it says I can't start the video because the host has stopped it. And my apology, I hadn't picked up that the meeting notice said we were in person, so unfortunately, I'm virtual. I would have been there.
So Vin, are you able to do the mute unmute? Okay, so you got that. So I think, all right, and all right, yeah, Pat, Vin's working on it.
Pat,
Okay, thanks.
turn on your camera.
And I got word that Todd's running late and Julie is going to start on Zoom as she's arriving, but my apology, I didn't notice that we were switching to in person.
Gotcha, and Shaunak is here.
Great.
Hey, Pat.
Hi.
And I think
So you
Todd's
look
gonna
good.
be
I can help.
online. So Pat, this is our last meeting where we can do more virtual because the legislation expired at the end of this.
Right. Yeah,
So this one,
I understood it was it triggered in March. That's why I wasn't assuming we were back to in person.
no, you're good. This one,
Yeah,
we
no
can be
worries.
both. So,
Hopefully, as long as we can get the tech to work, then
Well, there's
just
that.
give a second. So, yeah, this eating thing.
Councilmember Burt, I made you a co-host, so you should be able to turn on your camera now.
I think let's see again. It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. I have another link. I can sign off and try the other link. I got sent two. Let me sign off and try the other link.
Okay.
Got two meeting notices. See if
But during the discussion, when it came up, I said, oh, I don't think we can be here. Yeah, and we can't change the rules because it's not on the agenda. I just blurted out, no, send me the jam.
no, it's giving me the same thing saying can't start the video because the host has stopped it.
Leave it alone.
Every 7 hours you can.
It's, I felt less sick.
well, that's what
Yes.
Oh, it says I got promoted to being, oh, now the sound is off, muted. There we go.
Let's see.
Okay, now it told me I was promoted to being a host, but it's still not letting me join on. It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. That's what it keeps telling me.
All right, where should we sit that's gonna best maximize?
your camera angles?
There you go.
My good side.
Yeah.
You're on the other side of the table,
Oh, yeah,
but if
see,
you're
you're
gonna
able to-
swap with Todd, you
Yeah.
can. And then Don, we have you next to Ed, but if you need some more elbow room, you know, you guys can.
And just so you know, this is the camera. I think we're gonna be using.
That's Todd's favorite, actually.
It's a-
The owl is pretty magical. Then do I have a link for city schools? Cause I think.
Yeah, let me see if I go on to.
So if you want to sit there. It's perfect. Drink him right in front of the owl, which will make.
There you go, you and me, right?
That means you can't make any sounds.
So Julie's here in person, I think?
She will be. I think she's
She's coming up.
yeah.
I don't really.
I don't know if this is working. I'm not sure that volume's working. Well, maybe it is.
How are you? Well, you've been listening to us troubleshoot this whole time.
Laughing. Yeah.
The school children.
I said, maybe I should just stay in the car.
Nice to see you. Good morning. I told my kids, I was like.
So where do you?
Yeah, you're right here.
I literally driving out of the driveway. It's time.
And, you know, we can remove chairs. That's my thing.
Hi
How
there.
you doing?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you, Don.
Where's your doctorate?
San Francisco, but virtual, a lot of virtual.
Off
So,
here or anything?
yeah, I work from home most of the week. So.
Okay, yeah, got it. Yeah, I'm like, I can't help it.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
I am aware, but that did not mean that I cannot help. Thank you for that acknowledgement.
Yeah, not now, no. Although they just put in those express lanes in 101, which are interesting.
Do you like this?
Yeah,
I like them because you know what happened was my ZR was born, so I was driving on 101 for like a month and a half. All of a sudden I'm going to the office and they're express lanes. I'm like, huh. And I like them because honestly, if I'm gonna go to the office once a week, I'm over the spending the hour and a half in commute.
Right,
that I used
right,
to.
exactly. That's good.
No more.
yeah. I saw one of them recently. I don't know what time of day it was, yeah, but the amount to get.
Yeah, you're always kind of deciding, is it worth it to go in that lane?
So, just a question. Do we have members of the public who are waiting to get in?
Potential.
The meeting is open to the public,
Oh,
so
good.
we don't have anyone who wants to get in.
Okay,
Zoom.
there's Todd.
They said you're not gonna.
Good to see you. Good to see you, Todd. You're,
There's a new setup for me.
yeah, exactly.
Is the coffee still in
Yes, it's
there?
here.
Yeah.
Those hours.
Okay, we have forum then. Did we figure out? who
Well,
to
with
do
this delayed start, I would have raced down to the meeting in person.
Exactly. You could have made it. Oh, well.
it? Sorry, Pat.
Well, Pat, did you dial in because it was late?
No, I dialed in because I didn't realize we had switched to in person. And then they can't get me on video.
Right.
I couldn't get on video either. I was
Oh, yeah.
trying.
that's
Oh,
the thing
really?
for me then.
Mm.
Well, it says now Pat is the host. Pat, try to turn your video on now.
There you go.
There we go.
Vin,
at that.
Hey.
Pat, can you
Presto.
make, Pat, can you make Vin and I co-host, please? He gave you host power?
I'm sorry, did you talk, were you saying that to me?
Yes, yes.
Do you know
I'm
how
supposed to do what now? Make Vin?
And Chantel co-hosts.
Let's see, how do I do that?
Go to the panelist button at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm not excited about having
Okay.
face like.
So then do
I'm
you see
literally
the
about
link
6
to
inches from my
video
face.
Palo City Clerk?
Great. So I'm hearing a lot of voices, so,
All right.
Yeah, so if you're able to get to the participants and
okay, participants.
City of Palo Alto City Clerk, there are two of those. And promote,
Yeah.
I think you gotta, is it right click? Oh,
Make
over the three
co-host.
dots.
Got
Yeah,
it.
you got it.
Got it. That's all.
Perfect. All right, good.
Yeah, don't make me the host.
Don't log off, whatever you do.
Or do.
All right, good meeting to you.
Yeah. Well, I'll propose some. Over the agenda.
All right.
Okay.
We're about ready? I don't know who convenes the meeting because we don't have a chair.
How about you?
All right, I'll convene it and then we'll go to first item. So at this time, I'd like to convene the City Schools Liaison Committee for Thursday, February 16th, 2023. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Burt,
Here.
Councilmember Lipcott Haynes,
Here.
Board Member Collins,
Here.
Board Member Durant.
Here.
We have a forum of 4 present. Thank you.
Great. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. Our first order of the day is selection of a committee chair, and my understanding is this rotates to the city this year. And I would like to nominate Julie Lithcott Haynes.
I'll second that nomination.
All right. And do we have any discussion?
I would be delighted to have the opportunity to chair this committee this year. I'm incredibly passionate about the possibilities of city school district partnership. I know everyone here has had way more experience with that than I do. Looking forward to joining, listening, and helping move things forward this year. So thanks for the nomination, Councilmember Burt.
Okay. So seeing no other hands, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Burt,
Here.
The roll, or is it a yes
Oh,
or no?
I think we're looking for an eye here.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
I'm only a quarter cup of coffee into this morning.
Me me too. Yeah.
Councilmember Lipcott
Yes.
Haynes,
Aye.
Board Member Collins,
Yes.
Board Member Durant,
Yes.
the motion carries 4-0.
Great. Well, Julie, and
Yeah.
we're kind of
Yes.
informal in this meeting. So
Okay.
the chair is all yours.
Agenda.
Great. All right, well, it looks like our next,
Sorry, I don't have an agenda.
Oh.
Usually in the olden days, they had paper agendas here.
Sorry, we're getting used to that again.
Yeah, I know, I get it.
okay, so item B
Thank you.
is virtual meeting practices and connection information. Is that something we need to talk about?
No,
Not really, just for the,
Well, I think we were, that's the right word, anticipating that, actually with today being an example, we're in this transition from remote meetings to in-person. Our assumption being that next month's meeting will be fully in person, at least for the members of this committee.
Okay, terrific. And could the clerk perhaps help me with what is the protocol for inviting members of the public to speak and when? I know we have some members of the public here. Is it after every,
so
when do I do that?
I can help you with that.
Thank you.
So open forum comes next. Kind of you speaking under open forum.
Okay,
So under open forum, you'll call on
okay,
all present speakers.
okay.
And I don't know how you, do you allow virtual speakers? I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
and then it's managing that and then background.
Okay.
so you guess you have to ask the clerk, are there any people signed up?
Okay,
And then for the other items on the report of the city manager, those usually take one set of, public comment instead of one.
okay. All right, so let's go to open forum. And I know we have a member of the public here in person, and perhaps we have members online. So let's start with Ken Horowitz, who's here in person.
We used to have a lectern there for this, but I guess we
That's
don't.
all right. After 3 minutes, okay. Probably won't need that much time. But I'm Ken Horowitz. I've been a longtime resident of Palo Alto, and this is, I think, a very important committee because there are a number of issues that relate to the school district and the city council. And to my mind, there's nothing more important right now is the future of Coverly. And so I want to talk a little bit about Coverly. I sent both to the city council and to the school board the 2013 report from the community relating to planning for Coverly. And that was 10 years ago. Coverly is, the buildings now are over 80 years old. We need to plan. And in fact, the title of that community report is Failure to Plan is Planning to Fail. So I'm hopeful that this group now, liaison committee, will move forward to get Coverly decided upon. I mentioned in this school board meeting that they just had an earthquake in Turkey and Syria, and I don't know how seismically safe that Coverly facilities are. And the city council is also discussing priorities. And I noticed when the city manager gave his report on priorities from 2022, there was only a 10% progress made regarding the Coverly project. So we're long overdue on Coverly. So I'm hopeful that we move forward and make a decision. There's a lease that's coming up in next year, and I know the city and the school district need to plan for that as well. So that's 35 acres of publicly owned land, and I think it's time. So thank you for your opportunities for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody online?
Chair, we do not have any public participants online.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. Okay, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
I know in our bylaws, when we have somebody remote, we have to take a roll call vote, and I don't know if those rules are here.
When we have somebody remote. Okay, let's take a roll call on the
I think that's
vote of the
Brown Act.
minutes.
I think that's the Brown Act, actually.
Okay, gotcha.
Member Byrd,
Yes.
Chair Liz Hopkins,
Yes.
Board Member Collins,
Yes.
Board Member Garat,
Yeah.
the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Do we use last names or first names typically?
We do what we want.
Yes.
And traditionally in this committee, we have used first.
Is that all right,
Of course.
Todd? Is it all right if I follow up with you after the meeting to learn some of the kind of how things have been led?
You're more than welcome to. I'm sure the city clerk's office.
I would be
can do
happy to. I
At least
think
as
you
good a
were
job as me.
Were you the most recent chair?
I know, I haven't been on the committee for 3 years.
Oh, never mind.
But
Maybe I'll call Jen. Okay. 'cause
I just know how I mean, the Brown Act covers
Yeah,
this body just like it covers our individual bodies.
Sure.
And so I was just thinking of what
got you.
I just dialed in remotely to our board meeting this week.
Yeah.
And as a result, we had to do all roll call votes. So
Okay.
it's fresh in my mind.
All
I'm
right.
also happy to chat. I was on for 2 years.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Plenty of research.
Okay, let's turn to the report of the city manager and Chantal, you said that that public comment would come at the end of all these reports?
Typically, yes, so after, report of the city manager, report of the superintendent, report of the city council, and the BAUSD.
Then we take public comment.
So that said, I can't remember in my 3 years on the committee, there ever being public comment on any of those reports.
Okay, but if there is, that's when
Yeah.
we'll do it. All right, let's turn to the report of the city manager.
All right, very good. Thank you, Chair. It's just a very brief report on my part today. The one item I wanted to bring to the committee's attention is our ongoing work between the school district and city related to the potential for city employee access to PAUSD schools. This has been informal conversation.
You mean access for their children to.
For their children, thank
As
you very
opposed
much,
to-
as opposed to the employees themselves,
Yeah.
thank you very much, Director Collins. This has been an informal conversation for some time between city manager's office and superintendent's office. More recently, we've had our deputy city manager, Chantal Cotton Gaines, serving on a task force the enrollment task force that has been looking at a variety of options for addressing enrollment issues in the district. And we understand that this issue or this topic will be brought to the school district board shortly, and we anticipate perhaps testifying in support of that concept moving forward as an issue of interest for both the district as well as the city. We see this being in the interest of both organizations and the community at large. So that's the one topic I just wanted to daylight for committee and public awareness.
Can you just throw it, Ed? And I think I know the answer, but it'd be useful every day. Just ballpark, how many kids are we talking about?
All right, thank you. Chantal, would you be able to help me with that? We did a survey, and so we do have the figures. I actually didn't have that handy, so.
I can pull up the exact numbers, but just off the top of my head, I'm recalling of the amount of city employees who have school-age children. It was less than about 500 students, if I'm recalling off the top of my head. And then once we actually surveyed our employees to find out the interest level, it would equate to about 1 or 2 students per grade per school type of thing, if you were to sort of distribute it out. So it wasn't a vast number of students in the anticipated amount.
Thank you. Do you know what the total was? I mean,
I will pull it up. I
Yeah.
don't want to misquote right
I
now.
mean, my recollection, because you did share
We
that.
were both on the committee.
Yeah, I know you
Yeah.
shared the information with me, and I do recall, and I remember talking, and I maybe sent it to the superintendent. It wasn't, is 50 the number?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
I think
Sounds
50 was sort of what we were
Total.
talking about. So, which is, I think, useful. I don't want the paper to write, city, boards of city employees about to enter Palo Alto schools. I mean, that would be great. We'll see if that comes up being a thing, but the main thing is that we realize that it's a very moderate number of people that we're talking about. So, which I think helps dimensionalize the conversation.
Thank you. And I'll pull the exact number and share it when I have it.
The clerk should have admonished me. You should admonish me because I wasn't talking. Usually, one of the things I really like about coming here is the clerk's office is so sharp and professional. Is I wasn't speaking in the mic, which means that probably some recording device isn't capturing me properly. Do I need to speak? I mean, maybe things change. Do I need to speak into the mic?
Well, right now, because we're using the owl, technically you don't have to. But
Okay.
if you're speaking to the mic, that will make your voice louder, so that will help the owl pick it up as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question, Ed. I'm getting used to calling people by their first names. I like it. You referenced that the school district has an interest in enrollment. Obviously, the school district has an interest in enrollment numbers, but I wasn't sure whether you were saying specifically that this would benefit the district because there are enrollment concerns.
Well, I wouldn't want to presume what is in the district's interest, other than leave the impetus for the enrollment task force has been to address declining enrollment, and as such, if there are slots available, we have the potential for city employees to fill those slots, and in so doing, increase or improve the connection between our employees and the community they serve, as well as having the benefit of, to the extent that these are employees that are commuting into town, having flexibility as to which schools their children were to attend.
Okay. Are there any more comments on this matter? Chantal?
Thank you, Chair. Correct that the number would be between 50 and 100 students district-wide.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantal. Any further comments on this report? Okay. Seeing none, no member, all right, we're doing that at the end, members of the public, shouldn't be. Okay, let us move on. Do we have to move to accept the report? Is there anything like that? Okay. Okay, let's turn to the report of the superintendent of schools, Don Austin. Thank you, Don.
All right, thanks. Just a few things. Well, that owl is right on top of me.
Yeah.
The enrollment piece, that report was going to come in 2 weeks, but we need to do a little more work on that. So it's going to be coming in March. I'll get you the exact date, but there's been a date change in that. This might be an item that we want to agendize at some point in time, so we can really have a discussion about it if we need to do that. But I've appreciated our meetings with the city. We continue to meet each month and then more formally, had our first discussions about a few things and also a few things related to Coverly. So, we'll keep moving that ball along. Additionally, we have started our conversations with Stanford University about potential growth. Those meetings are also taking place routinely, and there's nothing to report right now, but I think we're in a better starting point with Stanford than we were last time around. I shouldn't say first time, but the last time around, I think we ended very strong. We did not start in a real good place, good, healthy place. So I think we're starting a much healthier place on that conversation. Recently, the announcement that there's potential to start the improvements at Buena Vista got the attention of our families. Of course, we have 71 families, not necessarily 71 families, we have 71 current students in Buena Vista. And of course, any relocation of the families could make it obviously more challenging for them to make it back to our schools or to remain in our district. We have a strong interest in keeping them with us. As far as the district's stance on this, I believe we'll have none. This is the housing authority in the city, and that we have nothing to do with that piece. What we do want to make clear to the families is that if they are relocated and able to attend our school, meaning able to get back to our schools, they'll be accepted as residents. So there'd be no break in their time with us. So that's important. And just the last thing, construction, everyone knows prices are going up and there's supply chain issues. And most people know that as they see it with their own homes and things. I can tell you it is no less true in big projects like our school district. We are getting supply chain issues and escalating costs. And some of the supply chain issues were things we anticipated and some are not. And some of the things people think about when you're building a school is you see the buildings and you see play structures, you see the landscaping. Most people think things like the electrical components are just a given. They are not anymore. So it is really changing the way we're thinking about projects and pacing. And this is the last piece of this because, you know, person on the street, including me, is like, well, okay, we know we're going to have projects in the future. Why don't we just stockpile stuff so that we don't have these issues? And the way our funding works with our procurement, we're not allowed to. It's a weird thing, but it has to be connected to an active project. We can't fill a warehouse, for example, full of electrical components, even if we know we're going to need them in 5-6 years. We're just not allowed. So it is changing the way our projects progress. But that's all I have for today.
Thank you, John. Questions, comments for Don? Well, hearing none from others, I being the newbie, I do have some questions. Apologize to the extent my questions cover ground that everybody is familiar with. That's what it means to have somebody new to the group. I was really curious about your language about Stanford and potential growth and being at a better starting point than last time around, and you ended stronger with them, so you're in a much healthier place now. And not trying to peer into private conversations that are not ready for public airing, but I would love a hint of what it means to be in a stronger position.
Yeah. So just going back in time a little bit, the last Stanford Gov started to hit its peak right when I arrived. So I'm new to town. I don't know anything about the partnerships that we have or could have with Stanford. I'd never even heard the term Gov. Right now it's ingrained in my head now. Didn't know any of the players.
Yeah.
And then the general tone when I first arrived was this is a fight, so go win a fight. Right? And when something's framed that way, you will get that desired effect of it's a fight. And it took until pretty late in the process for the school district to engage with Stanford directly. But when we did, it didn't take long to see we had a lot of similar interests. And we were able to go through that process pretty quickly. We did use a third-party facilitator that time, partly because there was still some tension. But part of that process was getting to know everybody's names.
Yeah.
Okay. So now the Stanford group is relatively unchanged, and our group is entirely changed. But I've been there, so I've been through it. So we're able to start now with just our groups together in a room. We don't need a facilitator right now. We're going to work through some things. And at the end, though, it's a math problem, so at the end, we're going to work through some things that make sense. And at the end of the day, bringing in additional students who are not tied to taxes the way other residents are for their property taxes is a cost to the district, and we'll need to negotiate that with Stanford. But we just feel like we're in a better starting point.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Are there also issues around transporting kids, say, from Stanford West over to Nixon? Issues related to shuttle, biking, anything like that? Does that arise in your conversations with them?
So, yeah, so let's take that outside of the GUP because Stanford West is already existing and there is no GUP right now. So Stanford West already exists. They had transportation from the school district for fee. And it's a hard one to convince everybody, but this is not a budgetary issue. We literally cannot find another bus driver. So we had to pull drivers when we moved Palo Verde to Greendale. So all the students that want to be transported are, and that pulled away from our Stanford West route. We do communicate with Stanford about the Stanford West families. In fact, we asked for Stanford's help. They could not figure out how to redo their existing bus routes. Any future building, we will definitely have conversations about transportation and how that impacts the district and their families. But Stanford West is kind of a different animal right now.
Thank you.
Can I just note on that? So in addition to the elementary school students, we have middle and high schoolers who have a really long distance to go from Stanford West. In particular, the high schoolers are gun students, is my understanding if that's still the case. And one of the things I'll just note that we've brought up and I've pushed for some time is really making the bike route all the way from Stanford West through campus, Hanover to the Bullpark Path become a real bike boulevard route that's has a continuous flow and is safe. And I'd just like to encourage us to have that on the agenda with e-bikes. It certainly helps facilitate longer bike travel, but I know that there are a lot of parents in Stanford West who have to drive their kids all the way to Gun High School in traffic to get their kids to school.
We hear from them.
Thanks, Pat. My final question is on Buena Vista. I appreciated, Don, you said we have a strong interest. We'll have no stance on this officially, but we do want to make clear to the families that if they are relocated, they will be accepted as residents, no break in their time with us, which is great. I wonder what you meant when you said we'll have no stance on this officially.
Yeah, I think some people would like the district to weigh in on the concept of the relocation in general. I don't think that's our place. Now, of course, when I say we'll have no stance, that's my statement. We won't have a staff stance. If the board wants to take it up at some point, they can bring up anything they'd like, but right now, that's not where we are. So we're much more interested in assuring families that they can remain with our school district. But as far as the merits of the project and the relocation in general, I don't think that's our business.
Okay, thank you. I understand that.
And can I
Yes,
just to add to that? So we, as you know, or I assume you know, we had this as an agenda item this last week and had a really pretty comprehensive discussion with the Housing Authority and had many of the BV residents at our council meeting. One of the things that the city is, and the county and the Housing Authority are part of a tri-party agreement on Buena Vista. And so the city is just trying to understand how influential of a voice we have. Do we have a greater voice than asking and suggesting in terms of helping assure that certain things happen in that redevelopment, including how we have a seamless relocation that doesn't interrupt students' attendance at their local schools. So we're still waiting in on that, but it probably is something where we can be really staying engaged with the district and then hopefully be, if necessary, even negotiating on behalf of the two parties of the district and the city.
thanks, Pat. It's really wonderful to feel that the district and the city are really quite united around the imperative to ensure that Buena Vista residents, that the children of Buena Vista, to the extent they attend Palo Alto schools, that will not be a disruption over these next many years when much of life will be disrupted. Yeah, so that'll be something we can all feel good about. Okay, those are my questions for the superintendent. Thank you so much. Anybody else further questions now that you've heard what I had to say? Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the report of the city council meeting. I hope I'm not expected to give it.
And you let Pat go first.
Generally what we do on.
I'll tell you what, I have a list. So Julie, these are where you and I report out on different things that we think are of relevance to this committee that the council has acted on. And since we haven't had a city school meeting since the first of the year, we're going back into January as well. If you'd like to go ahead and share any things that are high on your list, and then I can chime in and supplement that with, I have a number of things myself.
You know what, Pat, why don't you go first? Because I am probably getting clear in my head what is a highlight for me versus a highlight that should be shared with our colleagues here in the district. So I'll defer to you and I will add anything that comes to mind afterwards.
Yeah, so I'll focus on things that I think have particular interest to the district. So one is that we are getting ready to launch an on-demand shuttle service across town. This is, we received a grant through the VTA, and this is something that among the users could be students. We're hoping it's not going to be an Uber service, a subsidized public Uber-like service, so that kids don't ride their bikes to schools and instead have that shuttle to school. But it is low cost and certainly will help fill a gap that was lost when we discontinued our shuttle system. And then, as you may have seen, the council had our retreat and adopted our priorities for this year. They're largely unchanged from last year, which gives us some continuity in our focus. And that's about our economic recovery and transition, climate protection, affordable housing, and public health and safety with a focus on youth and youth mental health as a result of the pandemic disruptions. And then we, just this last Monday, as a follow-up to that, had the city staff came forward with a year work plan that was very comprehensive and aligned the various city initiatives that are within those categories. And the council added a couple that may be of particular interest. And I should say we added for them to return to the council for additional prioritization, because if we are adding focus areas, it may mean that we have to defer some things that were already on the staff generated list. But two that might be of interest to the district. One is what additional staffing and costs it would take to restore our libraries to the full pre-pandemic hours of service. They've been opening up more and more as we've been able to rehire and restaff according to the positions that we had already authorized last year. But that doesn't get us all the way to the former hours. And then we also expressed an interest in adopting in transportation, a safe systems, or you can think of a safe streets program. That's a comprehensive program that is really to make our streets safer for all modes of travel, bike, pedestrian, and vehicular. But certainly a lot of that is really a next notch up in bike travel and how we will make streets even safer. And a lot of the impetus came from our Safe Routes to School contingency. And that's not a program that's a flip of a switch. It really becomes an overriding set of transportation planning principles that would affect our upcoming bike and pedestrian master plan really in the coming years, not months. And then, as you may have seen, that we, like most of the state, have been subject to extreme variations in our commodity costs and utilities. That's both the natural gas and even our electric, because we in December had to pass along a increase in our hydroelectric rates because at that point in time, the amount of power in our large hydroelectric contracts, which in good years are about 45% of our power and all renewable and baseline power, that's basically a fixed cost. And so when less power is being produced, we have the same cost as we did when we were getting a lot of power. So the council last Monday gave a tentative support for pursuing a rebate to the ratepayers. Already we've had the natural gas prices that have gone from at least quadruple the historic cost to a reduction of 2/3 or more back toward normal levels. So ratepayers will be seeing that in the next month, but we're looking at a rebate to help mitigate those big spikes. And I hadn't been thinking about the district, and you're big consumers of power as well. And then we're hoping, but it's early to get firm information, but there's certainly all kinds of indications that we're going to have a resumption in the hydroelectric production, at least take us off the crisis mode, even if we don't get all the way to normal, and we may very well get there. As all of you know, we had New Year's Eve flooding that occurred, not with the severity that we had in '98, but certainly enough that it was of great alarm to the community. And there's an even renewed focus on the progress that was being made. One of the things that is not widely understood is that the flood control project that we have done from really 101 to the bay, which directly protected East Palo Alto residents who were at dire risk from flooding, also protected our residents, because the 98 flood was because not only did we have banks that overflowed and streets that turned into rivers, but that water had nowhere to go. And it became a giant lake that backed up and backed up. And what was different on New Year's Eve is that water flowed to the bay. It flowed on streets and sometimes into garages and homes, but largely flowed into the bay, and that's a big difference. And then on the next to the Stanford issues, we also are engaging with Stanford on a whole series of issues, not merely the GUP and the Municipal Services Agreement, which I want to make sure that you're familiar that obligates Stanford to provide for the equivalent of all municipal services. And the county has done a study on how fully that's been met, and for the most part, it is Stanford has done a full job, but there are some areas that we're all looking at. The county and the city are looking at collectively other municipal-like services that Stanford is prospectively obligated to provide for. And we have an ad hoc committee of the council this year that will be working with Stanford on a whole range of issues. I would say the most collaborative ones that we're having right now are around our sustainability efforts, which are involving not only Stanford from the academic side, but the Stanford lands in the city, the research park, the hospital, the shopping center, and residential lands that they own. Just as point of reference, approximately half of all the people who work in Palo Alto either work for Stanford or work on Stanford-owned lands. It's really kind of a startling number. So our relationship there is really important. And then second to last, we had our first rail committee meeting of the year yesterday, and one of the things that we are focused on is, do we attempt to move forward with dedicated bike and pedestrian crossings ahead of our reconstruction of the vehicular crossings, to help for two reasons, really. One was to assure that we had that bike and ped flow when we were doing construction, and that it would be really an uninterrupted and safe flow of including and probably largely student crossings. And the second is that there are now massive federal and state dollars that are available for that. And unless we have projects that are through the preliminary design stage, we don't qualify for that funding, which will not last forever. We're in a period of real opportunity for very big construction dollars. Lastly, we have on our upcoming agenda, I see, and I think Don and Ed are much more in the know on this, but an update on the Coverly land negotiations that are going on between the district and the city. So that's my mouthful.
Thanks, Pat. And I'll add to that just a couple of things. You're most likely aware that the city is undergoing its next housing element, developing that. It's in draft right now. We're awaiting comments from the state. But in our draft, we do contemplate a couple thousand units being on San Antonio Road. And as we look ahead to that, we of course want to get in front of what will that community be? Where will those children go to school? It's going to be an exciting set of visionary conversations, I think, and we're going to be excited to have those conversations with you. Coverly, of course, came up at our retreat, and our retreat, we're a little bit more free flowing in our conversation, and the question of Coverly, the dusty gem, this old important building, is very much on people's minds. And, we're very excited to be having those conversations with you. And finally, I just want to acknowledge something really different, which is that you and we lost a treasured colleague recently, Melissa Baden-Caswell. We honored her at the meeting on the evening in which she died. And I just want to say that we've lost an incredibly important, valued, treasured member of our community, and yours in particular. So this must be a difficult time for you and others in the district, and we just want to acknowledge that. Any questions for Pat or for me regarding the city report? Okay, seeing none, we'll turn over to the report of the Palo Alto Unified School District.
Thank you. And thank you for the acknowledgement of our loss, Melissa. There's only really one thing that I wanted to raise, which was the Mercy Housing teacher and staff housing project that the board approved. That's something that's of joint interest, as the city has put in money as well, and it will be built in Palo Alto. So that's moving forward, and it was approved by the board. One point I want to raise on that is the discussion the board had about whether or not bond funds could be used. And at the meeting, we basically said we can't use bond funds at this time, and we'll continue to explore it. And I raised that because as we have these conversations about Coverly, I think it's very relevant in terms of how future developments are funded at Coverly, knowing that the district is very limited and restricted in how bond funds can be used for projects. So much so that we couldn't even agree to use bond funds for housing that would go to our teachers and staff, simply because we weren't able to get 100% certainty on our legal ability to do that. So we are restricted in that in bond fund use, but the housing project is going forward, and I'm very happy about that. That's really all I have on our past meetings. We've had some great progress in areas including special education, which were I think of interest to the city as well, because I know the city has done a lot to make the city accessible. So we're rearranging our special education program, basically consolidating to allow for greater supports for our moderate severe students, but that aligns with our joint values of accessibility and inclusion.
Thank you, Shaunak. Questions, comments for Shaunak? Anything to add, Todd? All right. Do our members of the public have anything to say in response to these reports? No pressure. You're representing the whole public here today, Ken. Okay. Anybody online, Clerk?
We don't have any participants on that.
We don't. Okay. All right. Now we go to future business. Is this where we suggest items for the agenda, or how does that work?
Yes, and if I can jump in quickly, Chair. So this is where staff will update you on any items that we know of that are coming, as well as items generated by the committee. There are really no carryover items from 2022 to this year in terms of items that needed to be scheduled. I know the meeting cadence was one of the things that maybe wanted to be a discussion of the group. So I will offer that. We received some feedback. So I just wanted to open that up, Todd, if you wanted to bring that up. And then also I wanted to note that because the state of emergency ends this month, that the future meetings will all be in person. So that at the end of last year, that was one discussion of whether it would stay hybrid. So it would be hybrid for the public, as Mr. Shikata said, but the committee will be anticipated to have a quorum present in person. So the only item that I know of as of right now that will be scheduled future agenda is the Safe Routes to School presentation is anticipated for your March meeting. Because they then plan to take that to the city council subsequent to that meeting. That's the only item in yesterday's packet.
Okay. Madam Chairman, may I?
Please.
So I just wanted to, as Chantal alluded to, I've been on this committee. I think this is my fourth time through the wash. And what I learned about this committee is that while it may from time to time have a useful and important role, it generally does not. And I think this is, of all the committees I've served on, this is the one that I've had the most trouble figuring out what it's supposed to be good for. The substance of the meetings is largely what we saw today, kind of repeating things that have happened in the past, a lot of which you can read about in the paper. And while it's useful for even more foundationally, while, you know, 2 members of our body are sharing it with 2 members of the city's body, and there are some senior staff members here. In general, so almost none of that information makes its way back to the actual full bodies. During the time that I was on this committee, I gave reports after every meeting to our full body, just a 1-page brief saying what we talked about. Since I've been off that board, but before I did that, before I started doing it, and since I've been off, I can't recall a single time ever that a city school liaison committee content got communicated to the board as a whole. And so, you know, it's the kind of, it's the old, if the tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, you know, who cares? And so to the extent that we're meeting and it doesn't really have meaningful impact on our full bodies, then it's hard to figure out exactly what it is we're trying to do. And I say that because I've tried really hard to figure out what we're trying to do, and I struggle sometimes to do it. So it may from time to time, I mean, so one way I thought about it is there may from time to time be issues that, now, so of course, the city and the school district coordinating together is important. But we already do that in a number of ways. Most importantly, the city manager and the superintendent and some of the people that report to them talk to me regularly about the operational issues that are really the most important parts of what goes on between the city and the district. And when things arise that really are the subject of joint activity, like Coverly, in the past, we've appointed ad hoc committees with authority to actually say and do things on the full body's behalf, which Shanika and I, at least, I don't know what it's like on your side, but on our side, we don't have authority to do anything other than just say what our personal opinions are and what's happened at our bodies. So, you know, when we actually have substance to focus on, this probably isn't the committee where that substance is going to get discussed. Because we don't have the authority to do that. And it's easy to set up committees that are purpose-built or in purpose staffed around whatever the issues are that need to be worked on together. So I kind of think of this body as almost like an insurance policy. You probably aren't going to need to use it very often, but it's useful to have it around in case you do. And so, fitting with an insurance policy, you shouldn't have to spend a lot of time maintaining your insurance policy. So one of the things I thought is this committee traditionally has met 10 times a year, every month, but I think we take August off, July, thank you. Usually don't meet in January, though a couple times they've met in January in the past, sometimes don't meet in December. I think this didn't meet in December last year for some reason. Yeah, it was weird. Well, actually, I don't know, maybe the year before didn't meet in December. And what I'd suggest is maybe reducing that in half and meeting 5 times a year. And then rather than struggle for what is it that we're going to fill the time with, and we can see we struggle a little bit because basically we have 10 meetings to fill and we've got 1 item so far to put on. We instead would be, you know, take that smaller amount of meeting capacity and figure out how to fill it with stuff that was that might be richer and more productive. In addition, when I first joined this committee, which I think probably was 5 or 6 years ago now, I had ambitions to try to make it more robust. I tried to figure out how to make it a more robust committee. And one of the things at the time is, the city manager and the superintendent didn't attend. Neither one. We staffed it with our CFO. And I forget, it was Rob DeGoyce at the time. I forget what Rob's role was, but Miss City Manager Shikata, or the city manager at the time, I can't remember, didn't join the meetings. And I guess I wonder, I mean, I really leave this up to Ed and Don. It may make sense to go back to that again, because their time is very valuable, and I know their time is very valuable. And if we're not going to be discussing things that actually have direct implications for their work, I don't think it's necessary to have them at these meetings. They can obviously come if they want, but I'd be happy to see it staffed with other people who obviously also have important work to do, but don't have the. I don't think it requires the most senior people in the organization for the meeting to be effective. So that's my proposal: meet 5 times a year, and release the city manager and the superintendent from attending. And I don't know, I mean, it's funny, I was not sure. I mean, obviously this isn't agendized. I'm just talking about it under future visit. I'm not sure this kind of, I couldn't find any rules. It says a bunch of places, the group meets the third Thursday of the month. But I couldn't find anywhere that was encoded in any charter, or it's certainly not in any of our bylaws. So I think it's more about custom. And so I think it's probably up to the chair of the committee, or the committee as a whole could vote if they wanted, to basically set the cadence of the meetings and And so I hope, Julie, you'll take it under advisement, and I think it'll be a no less good committee meeting half as often and possibly better. So sorry for the long speech. That's what I got.
Thanks so much, Todd. Let's take comments and reflections in response to what Todd has just shared.
Mr. Duroff has his hand up.
Shaunak.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't dispute what Todd has said. I think that there is a lot of room for improvement on how this committee operates. I think in the product that comes out of the committee. I still, as the junior board member, I have sort of the naive optimism that Todd alluded to that he had when he first joined the committee, which is I think there's a way to make this committee more robust, but also more focused and narrow. And so my proposal, which is different than Todd's, but I think at least aligns with the same goal, is, what if, so when Pat and I were on the committee together a couple years ago or a year ago, we had this matrix, and I think Todd helped work on this too, the matrix of items that were items of joint interest to the city and the district. And I think the senior members of the committee at the time worked on it. So that was me and Pat. And I think Pat put in a lot of work and came up with the matrix. And so, if we have this sort of running list of items, and I can think of, Coverly is one, there are others. We have a running list of items. We can focus our agenda so that, instead of the reports taking up 4 agenda items, right? We can have report of city and report of schools, two items. And then, the city manager can talk. If council members have anything to add, they can, they don't need to. Likewise, superintendent can give a report. If board members have something else to add, they don't need to. It can be just 2 agenda items. And then there's another agenda item after that, which is 1 item of the matrix of the running list. And it can sort of be a more working meeting where we're discussing positions and potentially bringing back recommendations. The way that committees operate in the district, we have board committees in the district, and it isn't so much that board members on those committees have authority to make decisions in that committee setting, but what they do is they have discussions and then bring back recommendations to the board as a whole. And in my mind, this could operate in a similar way. For example, if we have something of joint interest on the agenda, we discuss it, there's a recommendation to be made, we might then go back and recommend that our agenda setting committee put it on the agenda or something like that, as a way to get it to the full board if needed. And that way we might be able to address issues that do have some joint interest or at least some overlap, and in a very targeted fashion, right? 1 per meeting, we can get through 10 of them in a year, or we can have ones come more than once, and reduce the number of minutes we're spending on reports, because by and large those are very pro forma, like this is what we voted on, and that's great, but it doesn't really accomplish anything. Something like that.
Thank you. Pat?
Yeah, thanks. So I largely concur with both Todd's and Shaunik's comments that just a forum for sharing updates isn't as productive as most of us would like to have our valuable time by senior staff and ourselves to be. As Shaunik alluded to, we had year before this last one, I had discussions with both Shaunik and Todd kind of offline about how do we not only for this committee, but just the whole relationship between the district and the city. We have all these different components that actually are about either services that we provide that affect one another, or that areas that we have common interests in serving the youth and families of our community. But we're going about those with different programs and different in different ways. And so is there a real value for us to look at having, I think what Todd had talked about is kind of a master agreement in all of those different relationships, and looking at taking a step back and saying, okay, here's all these piecemeal relationships that have developed over decades. Let's look at them in a systematic way. What's the right, or are we going about this the best approach in terms of who provides what services, and how we coordinate, how we share costs in different areas. And so I think if we were to attempt to really wade into that, that would be a very significant contribution to the long-term relationship of the district and the city, and serve our families and children potentially more effectively. One of the problems is, so what's the constraint? If we're really kind of wanting to go through that in a problem-solving method, we may need to get our city attorney to give us guidance on how we can do this through kind of a subcommittee of this committee to bring forward to the full committee any recommendations that would then, of course, need to go back to our respective bodies. But is that a real kind of substantive task of value that we would like to tackle? And I'm not sure that we need to meet every month to be able to do that. In fact, I think that the best work would probably be done if we would be allowed to do it through subcommittees. So I want to put that on the table and see what people think about that, even if we also adjust so that we aren't going through monthly meetings that are merely updates, like Todd suggested.
John and Ed, please feel free.
They can go first.
Well, yeah, again, with the benefit of, again, having been involved with this committee for a few years, I would agree that, there are wide options for the members to pursue in order to advance the common interest between the city and the district. I certainly agree that having some clarity on the relationship between this committee and the governing boards is really important. And again, stand by for your direction.
Okay, I mean, there's maybe more at the members. I mean, I assume on your side, it's just like ours. I'm not aware that you guys in the past, reports have been issued by this committee telling the other members what happened, and there's no charter handed by or authorization given by the board as the city council as a whole to the members to do anything, or
I think that's accurate, although the timing is interesting here because the council will be discussing its own protocols in the next few weeks. We already talked about procedures and protocols will be coming up. Part of that is, I believe, the role of liaisons and how and committees and how those reports get back to the full council.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and there's no, oh, sorry.
I'll just add on, in my time serving as liaison to this committee, the one item that was an action item, so really discussing sort of the role of the committee a little bit more. That item was voted on here and then taken to both respective bodies to be voted on with the recommendation that came from this committee. But I believe that was the only item that was voted on in my year service.
Yeah, that was back in the option. I was part of that, and that was the part of our optimistic effort to try to, a prior effort to make the committee more relevant.
John, did you want to add anything?
I was just laughing because I think it took us the whole year to draft that paragraph. Yeah, it's pretty efficient. Yeah, for sure. Like Ed, I'm gonna do whatever the group wants. I do think, though, if we want to accomplish real work, that's better done in an ad hoc committee setting than here typically. Because then there is an identified charge. Everyone knows what the role of the members are in those committees. So, you know, for an example, Coverly just, you know, this comes up. If we really want to have conversations between the council and our board, you know, a targeted ad hoc makes the preparation more consistent, the expectations more clear, and it's probably a better setting. But it just depends what the goal is. And last thing I'll say is, you know, this meeting from my seat is not super important because I do so much work with Ed and the city team. But I feel like that is our relationship piece. Sometimes people talk about the relationship between the city and the school district, and they assign whatever value they think that relationship has. Our relationship staff to staff with the city is high functioning and really good. So I think because of that, you know, I feel like a lot of that work is happening, but this is a different body. So, you know, by definition, this isn't my meeting or Ed's meeting. This is your meeting, and we're the guests. So be whatever you want out of it. So thanks.
Well, I'm gonna not take it personally as the new chair.
I should have let you.
It was great until the new
Dissolved,
chair
right?
came in. Yeah.
Exactly. I have to say that when I was elected to city council and I got the list of all the committees and commissions and boards and whatnots that one could try to be on, and I saw the existence of a city school district committee, I was excited. I was like, wow, city schools liaison committee, I want to be on that. And so here I am, new and listening. I want you all to know that I am fundamentally a relationships-based person and decision maker and leader and human, which means I believe that when we invest in getting to know one another, we have better processes that lead to better policies and outcomes. And so I'm deeply invested in the work of getting to know city staff and my colleagues on council, because I know that a deeper knowing based on trust will get us to better decisions and we'll all feel much better about doing the work. I'm a relative outsider here. I've lived in this city for 22 years. I sent kids to Briones, Fletcher, and Gunn. But I'm new to the work of it. So I will tell you as an outsider that there's a big perception out there that the city does its stuff and the school district does its stuff, and they don't seem to realize often that they're serving the same set of people. That is some of the word on the street. I'm sure there are other people on the street who think the relationship is terrific and is exactly as it should be. But what I heard this fall, as I was putting myself out there as a potential elected, was a real frustration. So I come in asking, well, what are we gonna do about it? And to the point Ken Horowitz made at the top of the meeting, there was a 2013 report, if I have this right, Ken, correct me, on the future of Coverly. And there was a quote or even a headline of maybe the report was called "Failure to Plan is Planning to Fail." Okay. So I would like to know what we're going to do about that. It is clear, for example, Coverly is an issue of joint concern. We had a report 10 years ago. We probably had a report 10 years before that. This is not new. We have reports of failing roofs and closed buildings and, worries about the seismic impact and what are the nonprofits and we might need it for a school, we might need it for a gym, and we might need it. We got 35 acres in this city. The biggest asset, one of the biggest assets we've got in this city. And it's on us collectively to figure out what we're going to do. That's one issue that we must take up. And so I find myself thinking, when I arrived here, I thought, okay, this is going to be the group that gets to talk about, to be the latest group to talk about Coverly. And after listening to all of you, I think what I'm getting is this particular configuration of humans under the rules that this committee has is not necessarily going to be effective at that, or is not the appropriate body for that. But perhaps we need a subcommittee or we need an ad hoc that will tackle the action items that represent our joint interests. And that is what I am deeply interested in doing. So I would like two things. So I want to put that out there. My thought is, let's not dissolve the committee. Let's perhaps reduce it to 5 times a year. We can be more thoughtful about that. I'm not ready to make any decisions on that today. But let us get to know each other really well so that when we are sitting around these tough negotiation tables, the trust is there. Todd, you used a great metaphor. You see this like an insurance policy. And the great thing is, you don't really it's there when you need it, but you don't need it till you need it. I see this as an investment policy that together, knowing each other's why, what we're up to and why we're up to it and why we choose to do this work, which can often be thankless. Why we're doing this, getting to know our why, getting to know and trust each other more, I think will allow us to make not just a decision where we need to, but a real visionary decision that ultimately our constituents will be grateful we had the guts to put together. That's the type of conversation I'm interested in. That's the type of leadership I think, frankly, we're all interested in. There's a lot of constraints on that, I realize. So I think the question I want to put out is it a subcommittee of this group that can be tasked with something that is meaty and actionable, or is it an ad hoc? Procedurally, what is the better way to go here, Sean?
I hesitate for us to start breaking up into subcommittees and ad hocs and sort of, turning this committee into like a sort of a tangled web of other committees that might not also do things. I mean, I don't know why we couldn't, as this committee, have conversations and reach outcomes that aren't actions. We're not taking action on anything. We're discussing ideas, and then we're bringing those ideas back to our board for additional guidance, for additional parameters, things like that. I mean, I think I'm pretty sure it's fully within our ability as a committee without having authority of our respective bodies to discuss ideas and potential future actions that then we take to the board as exactly that, as ideas for the board's consideration or additional parameters. I'm not sure why we can't do that in this committee without breaking into subcommittees or ad hocs.
Go ahead, Todd.
So I think I respectfully disagree. I mean, maybe, yeah, this may be covered by what you said, but I think before I would feel comfortable taking the initiative to, talk about framing a master agreement for covering all relationships between the city and the school district, which is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about and researching and talking to various city council members about and so on. I mean, it's an area of interest to me. But unless our body had discussed it and specifically charged me with going and working with people from the city to even flesh that out, I would feel like I was out over my skis. And which is why, and it might be that if we were to come to that, I mean, if I were on the receiving that and some other committee said, hey, we decided to go do this thing that was important, want to just check with you guys, make sure it was okay. My reaction would be, hey, whoa, let's back way up here. We got to first decide whether that's something that a road we even want to go down. So we've got to have a long agendized discussion about that. And then if we do want to go down that, we got to then decide, is the city school liaison committee the way to work that out? Or should we appoint an ad hoc committee? Or should we just ask Don and Ed to come up with something? It's one of multiple tools that we have. And frankly, not the one that I would typically turn to. And Coverly is an example. We had exactly that come up with some of the Coverly things 2 years ago. And both sides, both sides ended up appointing members of an ad hoc committee, and there was an ad hoc committee that met a dozen times maybe over the course of a year or more. That was specifically charged by their bodies with doing X, Y, and Z. And that it just seems like the chances of being effective are much higher if we have the full knowledge and blessing of the mother bodies, so that we don't kind of run down the path, set expectations among people about what, and then find out that, hey, I wish you'd checked with me because I'm concerned about this and this and this and this. And I'm like, I don't know, even sure those people were in the room. I mean, you're just a little liaison committee. So I'm a little hesitant to use this body to take on other things that haven't been fully vetted and prioritized by our respective bodies.
Sure.
To that point, I think we should figure out then what the charge of the committee is, because at least as it's framed on the PAUSD website, it includes, the purpose is to collaborate on issues of mutual interest. And I'm not sure what collaboration means if there's nothing except for reports happening. So I think we need to have an understanding then of what this committee is and isn't allowed to do. And then obviously change our actual website information to match that, because again, if we're not coming up with ideas, then I don't think we're really collaborating. We're just listening to what happened at the last meeting.
So I refer you to the thing that Chantal mentioned, which I was voted on at our board. You might have been. I don't remember if you were on the board or not.
It was Jennifer. Oh,
I don't remember who was after Chantal was elected. I might have been. It was probably right in there.
Yeah.
But we worked on exactly that problem. And I can't remember what we came up with and whether it was collected in Chantal.
Can you share?
I can. I will also email it to the group.
And what is what are we calling this?
It is a purpose statement. I actually can do a screen share.
It's our website. Wow, look at that. Good for you.
Because she's a co-host.
And the purpose.
Actually, you're not.
I'm not.
The purpose statement for this committee?
Yeah,
Okay.
so in November 2019, it was voted upon by both bodies.
Yeah.
You have that date. So I'll just read this
Yeah.
purpose statement, or if you guys can.
It didn't get much.
Okay, so the idea of it is to establish stronger relationships between and among the elected officials. That's the point that Chair Pat Haynes mentioned. Gain understanding of perspectives, opportunities, constraints of PAUSD, the city, and other schools in the community. Share current actions and activities, explore current and ongoing issues of mutual interest, identify issues and advise means to prevent issues from arising in the future, work together on relevant community projects, and regularly communicate to both bodies. I believe that is the end of the document.
So I would say that devise means and work together falls to me squarely in the realm of, coming up with ideas. So I would say that our board and council have approved us to do that. At least that's my interpretation of our charge.
If I may, yeah, so in bullet 4, if we could have that back on the screen, is maybe the bullet that pertains to, in the broadest interpretation of that, pertains to what we were talking about of really looking at kind of a master plan relationship. And even though I think we could argue that it is covered under bullet 4, I do think that if we're going to go into a serious pursuit of that kind of master plan, it's a pretty big deal. It's never been done in 40 plus years that I'm aware of relationship between the district and the city, whether it's through this committee or otherwise. Closest thing goes back to when the district was doing school closures, and that's how we, well, and I guess I'm sorry, there was a big kind of deal that was made during that period. That's how we came up with the Coverly relationship, the Ventura school site, all of those related school lands that basically the city came forward and helped the district through really trying times of enrollment transitions and financial challenges that the district was going through. And then we've never really stepped back since then and looked at these things as a package. So I would think that it would at least be helpful for us to go back to our respective bodies and we can continue this conversation in our next meeting and then, maybe decide on whether to do this, go back to our respective bodies and say, within this context of the kind of purview of this committee, we are interested in exploring kind of a master plan, a laying out of the comprehensive relationship that we have, and at least have the affirmation of our bodies to go forward with exploring that. And I kind of stepping back and looking at our common interests and our respective differences is really important. I've just to kind of share on my perspective on the Coverly scene. Yeah, everybody in the community is frustrated that more progress hasn't been made, but part of that is that we have to acknowledge that in the case of Coverly, we haven't had aligned timelines and interests. This whole thing was instigated, I don't know, about 2010 when Foothill De Anza wanted to put a satellite campus on the location, and the district at that time was in the process of a booming enrollment that got even worse subsequently. The district was at that time certain that they were going to need a full third high school at that site, and they were talking about taking back the limited 8 acres that the city actually owned and had control of. And so we've had this situation where, for the most part, Coverly's land is owned by the district, and the city has been managing the use of it for decades. And then even more recently, we had as we went through a comprehensive Coverly planning process, it was really instigated by the city and based upon the city's interests in what Coverly could be. And it was a great vision, but it wasn't aligned with the district's interests. And the district was at a point where they had flipped from booming enrollment to declining enrollment, and more clearly now a continued path for the near future on that, at least. And so the district really needed to bank land for future purposes that they couldn't decide at this time. But I do think that, and that's part of why we've now gone forward with this exploration of a land swap that would give the city enough of its own land that we would be able to pursue significant redevelopment there and still look at common uses of that of the land that would complement our individual uses. So, you know, I think that's a good example of us needing to understand that we can't impose one party's interests on the other necessarily, but we can yet come up with solutions that will allow for moving the ball forward. So I go back to thinking that if it would be of high value to our constituencies if we work together on a comprehensive approach to all of the different things that are part of this relationship. And I can resurrect this document from a year and a half ago, the draft that we at least tried to have an outline of. What are all of the different intersections that we have that are existing? Because we don't have them in one place. And I think maybe that would be a starting point for the next meeting. And then what we do with that can be the basis for our discussion. So I'd offer that up to bring that to the next meeting and distribute it in advance of the meeting so that we can at least look at what's the global set of areas that we have existing collaborations on and overlapping and synergistic interests.
That's terrific. I'm gonna just note that time is 10 and the meeting is meant to only go till 10. Doesn't have to go till 10, but it has gone till 10. So we should adjourn rather quickly. I want to thank everybody for what's been shared. We will meet again next month. We will, Pat, if you will distribute the document of the intersectional issues that you just raised, that would be great. I think if we could also get distributed the document that you just shared, which is the definition of what this committee is meant to be. Frankly, I think liaison is too small a name and probably makes us feel that we don't have the authority. It looks like we may actually have if you read the details. So a simple name change may be in order, joint powers, maybe not that. Right? But looking forward
That's
to,
illegal.
yeah, okay, fine, it's illegal. See, I'm that new, I'm proposing illegal things. All right, so we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Also be prepared to come to share your why. It's something you can share off the cuff, but I will be asking everyone to go around and sharing a little bit more about why you got into this work in the first place, because I would certainly like to know that about you, and perhaps you'll learn things about each other.